I'm Dr. Sturm, and in this video segment we're going to discuss igneous rocks. Now I know you don't have a lab section on igneous rocks, but this is a really important group of rocks that for those of you who are going into geology, you should at least know a little bit about. So igneous rocks, of course, are composed of minerals. And igneous rocks typically have minerals that have grown together. Those minerals are interlocking. So igneous rocks tend to be some of the strongest rocks. That's why you'll see at home improvement stores, they have granite countertops. Well, what you'll learn is that they call them all granite, but there's actually different types of igneous rocks. So basically there are two types of igneous rocks. One forms underground and it's called intrusive. And that's when the molten magma, which is molten rock, cools underneath the ground. Typically, magma will take a long time to cool. It could take thousands and thousands of years before it cools to form a solid rock. The other type of rock is extrusive. We see this in Hawaii with the volcanic eruptions in Hawaii. So we have magma that's come up to the surface. When it leaves the underground and comes onto the surface, the name changes and it becomes lava. So lava refers to liquid flowing rock on the surface of the earth. And so we see that in Hawaii. So we have extrusive and intrusive, and both of those types of igneous rocks have different crystal sizes. And the crystal size helps us identify the rock. Now the reason they have different crystal sizes is because the crystal size indicates how long it took to cool. So to build a bigger crystal means it's going to take more time. And so it cooled over a longer period of time. But when you look at the rocks that form in Hawaii, if you pick up a piece of basalt from Hawaii, which would look very much like this, and you actually look at it, you cannot see the individual crystals. They're actually microscopic. And the reason is when the lava comes out on the surface of the earth, it interacts with our air and atmosphere, and that's significantly cooler, so it immediately makes really teeny tiny crystals and it cools very, very rapidly. So the crystals are very tiny and they don't have time to grow, and they become microscopic. So we look at that crystal size, and that helps us determine the name of the rock. We also look at the composition. So igneous rocks are determined by the composition, which means what minerals are inside that rock, and the name is determined by the crystal size. So for igneous rocks, the composition, there are 4 groups of composition. Your first compositional group has large amounts of quartz. This has the highest amount of quartz. It also has calcite in it. It can have a variety of other minerals too, but the quartz and the calcite were the 2 dominant for this group, particularly the quartz. Then we have this mid-range group, and this is called intermediate. This is a mixture of minerals from the Felsic group, which contains the highest amount of quartz, and those minerals with the mafic group, which contains less quartz. So this still has a very high amount of quartz, so you're going to see a lot of white in it, but you're going to see more and more a mix of the darker minerals, the pyroxenes, and we're going to see more of the dark minerals, and that's why it's intermediate. It's a mix between the light and the dark. And then the mafic rocks. Mafic rocks, again, we have the darker minerals like the pyroxenes and amphiboles. And again, we have different crystal sizes, but they tend to be very dark. So it still has a lot of quartz in it. It has at least 50% quartz. And sometimes when we look at the mafic rocks, you can actually see how much quartz. So this one has really a white tinge to it. Well, you're seeing a lot of the quartz that's in it. This one, the crystals are arranged a little bit differently, so you aren't as aware of the quartz. It's still there, it's in a high amount. It's just reflected differently. And then the last group is called ultramafic. And ultramafic is where we find all the olivines, the different types of olivine minerals that compose the ultramafic rocks. So those are your categories: Felsic, which has the highest amount of quartz, intermediate, mafic, and ultramafic. Ultramafic has the least amount of quartz. Felsic has the highest amount of quartz, but all of them have quartz. So then we're going to look at the crystal size. So you can have very large crystals. So a large crystal rock would be like this one. You can actually see individual groupings of color. So we have black, we have white, and we have pink that are in this rock that are very, very clear to see. When you look up close, you might also see some gray and little tiny bits of biotite in here. But the big dominant ones are white, pink, and black. So that's phaneritic because you can easily see the crystals. You don't need a magnifying glass, you don't need a microscope, they're very, very visible. So when we look at this felsic category and we look at phaneritic, the name for this rock is granite. Now, phaneritic rocks, all of them that have the large crystals, they are all intrusive. So that means they form underground. So phaneritic are intrusive. So these will never come out of a volcano. They form and they cool underground entirely. So if we come across the intermediate, but stay on this phaneritic, we have a rock that contains minerals of equal amounts of the dark minerals and equal amounts of the light minerals. And this is called diorite. Diorite reminds me of a Dalmatian dog. So you see the Dalmatians in the old pictures, they show the dog on the fire truck and he's black and white. So black and white is diorite. So we have diorite as our large grain, intrusive, intermediate rock. Then we come to the mafic category. And again, we have large crystals. Now, one of the other things about the ones that are phaneritic is that we go back to those luster terms. Phaneritic, because they're large crystals, if you move the rock around, you're going to get those crystals to reflect light and it's to come back to your eye, and so they might have a little bit of sparkliness to them. Now, it's going to depend on how worn the rock is. So like this round diorite, this came out of a river in Oregon. And so it's been well rounded, and so there aren't any shiny spots on it anymore because the river has worn those down. But in this case, these were broken off from a fresh piece of rock, and so we have lots of fresh crystal faces, and so they reflect back at you. So the large mafic crystals form rocks called gabbro. Gabbro. And then the ultramafic, we're only going to look at one rock that's ultramafic, and you can see it contains high amounts of olivine, and these have larger crystals, and this is called dunite. Dunite. So a lot of times people think about Ireland, and I don't know, Dublin, dunite, Ireland, Dublin. So you have to think of these unique little word devices to help you remember the names for these rocks. So all of these form underground. They're all igneous, they all form underground. These also are the ones you're going to see at the home improvement stores that are sold as countertops. They're getting the intrusive igneous rocks. And so they'll call them all granite, but in reality, there's going to be a different name for each type. And of course, you can even have combinations. You can have a diorite going into a gabbro, and that may have a completely separate name, or a gabbro going into a dunite. So these kind of are on a continuum. They aren't always discrete and separate. But know that all the large crystal rocks are phaneritic, which means large crystals, and they all form underground. Now, there is one type that's extra large, and it's only under this felsic category. So occasionally we have extra large crystals. So this is an example, and it's called a pegmatite, a granite pegmatite. There are only 3 minerals in this big chunk. We have a piece of biotite here. This kind of gray mass is quartz. And then we have potassium feldspar here. So there's only 3 minerals. The individual crystals, matter of fact, like for instance, this individual crystal biotite is bigger than my thumb. When you have a crystal that's bigger than your thumbnail, then that's called a pegmatite. Pegmatite. And the name for that is a granite pegmatite. So that does not occur in these other ones. Then the next group is aphanitic. And aphanitic rocks are extrusive. That means they come out of volcanoes or come out of fissures in the ground. So for instance, in Hawaii, we see it coming out of the volcano, and we also see fissures opening up in the ground and lava flowing out. Well, what's going to come out is called aphanitic. These crystals are so tiny that you really do need either a magnifying glass, you can either use a magnifying glass or even a microscope to see the individual crystals. So when we have a felsic group like this one, and you can see the felsic is all the light colors, you're going to have the pinks and whites in the felsic category. Then this is called rhyolite. So rhyolite. And different volcanoes produce different lava. So for instance, an example of a rhyolite volcano is Yellowstone. Yellowstone National Park is one of the largest volcanoes on Earth, and it will produce a rhyolite type lava. Rhyolitic lava typically does not flow. It comes out in chunks, so it's really chunky lava, but it releases a lot of poisonous gases. And these are your most explosive volcanoes. So if this goes off, it would destroy everything all around it because it's a rhyolitic volcano. Now, if you come over to the intermediate section, I actually don't have a good example for this next rock. It's called andesite. Andesite is typically just a light gray in color, and again, it is very, very tiny crystals. An example of where you can find andesite is the Andes Mountains in South America. Those mountains are actually named after the rocks that are in them. So andesite comes from the Andes Mountains in South America. The next group is mafic. So we have our dark colored rocks. This is what's coming out of the volcanoes in the volcano in Hawaii. So basalt has a lot of the dark minerals. Again, the crystals are so tiny you cannot see it. And we don't have anything under ultramafic. So that's the small crystals. They all come out of volcanoes. Well, what often we see coming out of a volcano is a mixture of large and small. So what happens is you'll have the magma that's sitting underneath, under the ground, and it's in an area where it's going to come out in a volcano. Some magma is not associated with volcanoes, but a lot of it is. And so some of that magma is sitting underground and it's beginning to cool. So it's starting to form bigger crystals. Matter of fact, in this particular intermediate rock, you see a lot of white crystals on a gray background. Well, those white crystals are the phaneritic crystals, and the gray background are the aphanitic crystals. So when we have it mixed like that, all we do, we take the name for the aphanitic. So in this case, this is an intermediate rock, so it's andesite, and then we add the word porphyry. So this is an andesite porphyry. A lot of these names have unique spellings. Under the, oh, I didn't pick one up, but under the felsic, we would have a rhyolite porphyry. So a lot of times you'd have this pink background, and then you may have some bigger pieces of the biotite or muscovite in it. That's your most common mixed combo in that. So this is a rhyolite porphyry. And then under the mafic category, this one, I wish you guys could see this up close, but this is your basalt, and then there are all types of green prismatic crystals in it. So it's filled with green crystals. And probably some of the crystals are apatite, but we have a lot of green in there. And so this is a basalt porphyry. Porphyry is P-O-R-P-H-Y-R-Y. Again, we have nothing under ultramafic. And so that's a mixture of large and small. Then your last two types of possible rocks that can form are glassy and vesicular. Now, under glassy refers to that it's dominantly 100% quartz. It does not refer to the fact that it actually will reflect like glass and be vitreous. So we have two types under glassy. Actually three types under glassy. One of them falls under another one too. So the first one makes sense. You know, you've seen this before probably, and this is called obsidian. This is volcanic glass. As I mentioned in the mineral section, this is dominantly quartz. It's almost 100% quartz, but the color, the dark color in obsidian, comes from just one or two atoms of an element that gives it that dark color. Now, what's interesting about obsidian is that you want to examine how it breaks. So glass, as you know from breaking a glass, it breaks in a particular pattern, and it's called a conchoidal or fracturing pattern. So it kind of has this circular effect, and obsidian can be extremely sharp, very, very sharp. Matter of fact, they used to use it for surgical tools because it's actually sharper than steel. So I have sliced my finger on obsidian before, so you do have to watch it when you are handling it. So obsidian falls in that glassy category. And again, it's 100% quartz. So another one that falls in that category, this is in a container because I don't want it to get all messy, but this is volcanic ash. So this did come from a volcano out west. Matter of fact, a couple summers ago, I was in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and stopped and collected a lot of volcanic ash to be used in the classroom. So this is just a loose material. It looks very similar to baby powder, but it is 100% quartz. So even though it's not reflective at all, it's dull in luster. Because it's 100% quartz, it falls under the glassy category. So that is volcanic ash. All right, and then the last category we have is vesicular. The word vesicular means it has bubbles in it. Now, a lot of times you're only going to get bubbles in rocks that have come out of a volcano or come out of the ground. So it only occurs with lava. So for instance, I have this large piece. This is called lava. Well, it's a rock now, but it's And this is that name. Most of our volcanic rocks, the names for them for basaltic lava come from Hawaii because that was originally one of the more studied areas in the world. And so there are two types of lava flows. So refers to it hurts when I walk across it. And so that is actually the native name, the Hawaiian name for that type of lava. It is very sharp. The park rangers that work at the national park on the big island of Hawaii typically have to replace their boots every few months because this type of rock is so sharp that the bottom of their boots get completely cut up. So it becomes shredded over time, and to protect their feet, they have to regularly purchase new boots. So where you might have a boot for at least a year to 5 years, these boots every 2 or 3 months, depending on how much you're out on the lava flows. Then you have another type of lava flow. I don't have the example in here, but it's smooth. It's not going to hurt you if you walk on it, and that's called pahoe lava. And it's a smooth, ropey finish. And so that's not painful to walk on. But again, those are two terms from Hawaii. But this lava, you can see it has lots of holes in it. Well, those are vesicles. Those are vesicles, those are air bubbles. And if you have a lot of air bubbles in a lava flow, you can have so many air bubbles that the rock will actually float on water. Now it can float on water because those air bubbles are not connected. So there's pockets inside of air, but they're not connected to each other, so water cannot flow through it. When we get to sedimentary rocks, we actually look at rocks that also have air bubbles in them, or not particularly bubbles, they're little channels that water can flow through. We see that in limestone and sandstone. Water flows through those types of rocks. But in these igneous rocks, this is pumice, the bubbles are not connected, so we have these basically like little balloons inside the rock, and you put it in water and it's actually going to float in the water. So this is pumice, and pumice is a vesicular rock. It is also 100% quartz, so it also falls into the glassy category. So pumice is both vesicular and glassy. Now, under the mafic category, we also have a vesicular rock. Typically, it is not as lightweight as the pumice because it has other minerals in it. So it has some of the pyroxene and amphibole. That's why it's dark. These are heavier minerals, so it will not normally float on water. This is called scoria. So when you see it dark like this, filled with air pockets, then it falls in the mafic category. And so we have a mafic rock that is filled with all kinds of vesicles. So that's your basic introduction to igneous rocks. These are actually probably one of the easiest type of rocks to identify because color is a top component in identifying igneous rocks. The felsic rocks are typically white to pink in color. The intermediate rocks tend to be gray with both white and black in them. Your mafic rocks tend to be dark gray to black, and then the ultramafic are going to have a lot of green minerals in them. Lots and lots of green minerals like apatite. So those are your basic igneous rocks, and just thought you should know that as a good foundation for geology.